If you can control time, you can control people. That was what they said about Victoria Hale, though no one ever said it out loud. Not where she could hear it. Not inside the glass walls of Hale Dynamics, where every second had a purpose and every minute had a price. And this morning was no different. The digital clock in the lobby clicked from 7:59 to 8 o'clock, and the entire building seemed to inhale at once. Heels struck marble in precise rhythm. Elevators opened and closed like synchronized machinery. Assistants adjusted tablets with quiet urgency, because when Victoria Hale walked in, time didn't move forward. It aligned itself around her. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Everything else rushed for her. Her schedule had already been mapped down to the minute. Breakfast meeting at 8:10. Investor call at 8:42. Transit to Midtown at exactly 9:05 with a calculated margin of 3 minutes. Not 4, never 4, and outside. Parked along the curb where the city hummed in early traffic, Daniel Brooks sat behind the wheel of a black town car, engine running low and steady, hands resting lightly at 10 and 2. Not gripping, not tense, just there, present, like he had been sitting in that seat his whole life. He glanced once at the clock on the dashboard, 8:01, then out at the street where a cyclist weaved between lanes and a mother adjusted her child's backpack before crossing. The world moved the way it always did, uneven, unpredictable, human, and Daniel didn't try to correct it. He just watched, breathing slow, measured, as if the noise outside couldn't quite reach him, as if time, for him, wasn't something to chase but something to carry. The passenger door opened sharply and Victoria stepped in without looking. The scent of clean linen and something sharper followed her. She placed her phone against her ear before the door fully shut. "Push the 8:42 to 8:38, she said, voice precise, already mid-command. "No, we're not adjusting for them. They adjust for us." Her eyes flicked briefly to the rearview mirror, just enough to register him. The new driver, nothing more. "We leave now," she added, though they already were. Daniel eased the car into motion without a word, smooth, controlled, no sudden acceleration, no unnecessary force. The city opened in front of them in layers of steel and glass and movement. Her voice continued, slicing through conversations, rearranging people she hadn't even seen yet, while his hands guided the wheel with quiet certainty, not rushing to beat the light as it turned yellow, not forcing the gap between two taxis that edged too close. He slowed, just slightly, enough to let a pedestrian finish crossing, enough to avoid the abrupt stop that would ripple through the cabin. Victoria paused mid-sentence, not because she wanted to, but because the rhythm shifted, just a fraction. She lowered the phone a few inches, eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly as she noticed it. The absence of urgency, the refusal to bend to the pressure she carried into every room. "You're losing time," she said, not looking at him, more a statement than a question. Daniel didn't turn, didn't defend, didn't adjust his pace to prove anything. He simply kept driving, steady, grounded, as if the seconds slipping past meant something different to him than they did to her. Outside, the city continued its restless pulse. Inside, something didn't match. Not yet, not fully, but enough to be felt, like a clock ticking just a little offbeat in a room that demanded perfection. By the time the car reached Midtown, the city had thickened into its usual morning gridlock, horns layered over the low hum of engines, pedestrians filling crosswalks before the signal fully changed, and still, inside the car, the pace remained steady, almost detached. Victoria ended her call with a sharp tap on the screen and immediately began another, her voice precise, controlled, reshaping conversations that had not even started yet. "Move the board briefing to 10:15, not 10:20, and tell them I expect the full report, not a summary," she said, already anticipating resistance before it came. Her reflection flickered in the tinted glass, composed, unreadable, built for control, and then the car slowed again, not abruptly, not inefficiently, just enough to allow a delivery truck to merge cleanly into the lane ahead. Her eyes shifted this time. Not just a glance, but a measure, a calculation that did not quite resolve. "There was space," she said, voice lower now, less for the call and more for the air between them. Daniel nodded once, not defensive, not apologetic. "There was," he replied, simple, even, the kind of answer that did not try to win anything. She ended the call. Not because she had finished, but because something in the rhythm no longer matched her expectations. Silence settled for a moment, not empty, just unfamiliar. She checked the time, 8:27, 3 minutes behind the projection she had already adjusted twice. 3 minutes that would ripple forward, compressing everything that followed. She had built systems to prevent this, layers of precision designed to eliminate variables. And yet here it was, a variable sitting quietly in the front seat, not resisting, not complying in the way she understood, just existing on a different scale. "Do you always drive like this?" she asked, not quite a question, more an observation looking for a boundary. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. The light ahead turned red, and he eased to a stop without tension. "I drive to arrive," he said, the words landing without emphasis, as if they had been true long before this moment. She studied the back of his shoulder, the stillness in the way he held the wheel. There was no urgency in him, no edge of performance, no subtle attempt to prove himself under scrutiny. Most drivers adjusted within minutes. They learned the pressure, mirrored it, accelerated just a little harder, cut corners just a little closer, trying to match her expectation before she voiced it. But he did not. He left space where others would close it, allowed pauses where others would fill them. The light changed, and the car moved again, smooth, unforced. A taxi edged in too quickly from the right, and he did not react with irritation, just a slight shift, a measured correction. The kind that avoided the jolt altogether. Victoria felt it, the absence of disruption, the way the moment passed without leaving a mark. Her phone buzzed again, a reminder flashing for the next call. She looked at it, then at the street ahead, then back at the time, 8:29. She should have already been preparing her notes, aligning her tone, stepping mentally into the next room before entering it physically. But instead she found herself watching the way the city moved around them. The uneven flow she usually cut through, now unfolding without resistance. "We are late," she said finally, though the edge in her voice had softened, just slightly. Daniel nodded again, not in agreement, not in dismissal, just acknowledgement. "We will still get there," he replied, and something in the way he said it did not rush to fix the problem, did not try to compress time back into her control. It simply held the outcome steady, as if arrival mattered more than the seconds it cost. And for a brief moment, one she did not name, Victoria did not correct him. The car eased to a stop beneath the glass overhang of the Midtown Tower at 8:34, the building rising in clean lines of steel and reflection, a place where delays were measured and remembered, where minutes had weight. Daniel shifted the gear into park with the same unhurried precision he had shown all morning, then stepped out, circling to open the rear door without rushing, without theatrics, just a simple motion done right the first time. Victoria stepped out, already glancing at her phone. Her assistant was waiting just inside the revolving doors, tablet in hand, posture tight. "You are 4 minutes behind," the assistant said quietly, not as criticism, but as fact. Victoria did not respond immediately. Her eyes flicked once toward Daniel, just once, as if measuring whether those 4 minutes belonged to him or to something she had not accounted for. Then she turned and walked inside, heels striking marble again, reclaiming the rhythm she controlled. Meetings stacked, one after another, voices rising and falling in controlled urgency, presentations delivered, decisions made in clipped sentences, time compressed and redistributed with surgical precision. And yet, the 4 minutes lingered somewhere beneath it all, not disruptive, not catastrophic, just present, like a small shift in alignment that no one else could see. By 10:15 she was in the boardroom. Glass walls, skyline stretching beyond, executives seated with tablets open, waiting. She began without apology, without explanation, her voice steady, reclaiming authority with every word. Numbers moved across screens, projections adjusted, strategies debated, and still, in the pauses between responses, there was something unfamiliar, a slight hesitation before she redirected a question, a fraction of a second where she did not immediately cut in, as if part of her was listening for something that was not there. Across town, Daniel sat in the driver's seat again, parked along a quieter street. Engine off now, the city noise softened to a distant hum. He checked the time, then reached into the back seat, pulling forward a small backpack, worn at the edges but clean. He unzipped it and glanced inside. A lunch container, a folded worksheet, a pencil tucked carefully along the side, everything in its place. He closed it again and set it beside him, then leaned back, hands resting loosely, not filling the silence, just letting it settle. A few blocks away, a school bell rang faintly through the air, carried between buildings, and he smiled, not wide, not obvious, just enough to change the shape of his face for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by the same steady calm. Back in the tower, Victoria stood at the window during a brief break, phone in hand, notifications stacked, reminders pressing forward. She should have been reviewing the next file, adjusting the next sequence, but instead she watched the street below, cars moving in uneven patterns, pedestrians crossing before the light, a rhythm she had spent years learning to override, to control. Her phone buzzed again, insistent. She looked down at it, then back at the street, and for a moment she did not answer. The pause stretched just long enough to be noticed by no one but herself. Then she lifted the phone and continued, voice precise, schedule intact, but something in the timing had shifted, just slightly, as if a space had opened where there had never been one before. By early afternoon, the schedule had tightened again, every minute accounted for, every delay corrected. Victoria moved from one meeting to the next with the same precision that had built her reputation, but the earlier shift had not disappeared. It lingered beneath the surface, subtle, unspoken. At 2:40, she exited the building for her next appointment across town, her assistant already listing adjustments made to recover the lost time. We compressed the lunch window and moved the investor call to 3:20, the assistant said, walking half a step behind. Victoria nodded once, absorbing the information without comment. The car was already waiting. Daniel stepped out and opened the door with the same measured calm. No rush, no performance, just presence. She entered, the door closed, and the city swallowed them again. Traffic had thickened, afternoon congestion building in uneven waves. Her phone buzzed before the car even merged into the lane. Put them on, she said, voice returning to its controlled edge. The call connected. Voices layered through the speaker, numbers, concerns, pressure. She navigated it, all with practiced efficiency, adjusting timelines, redirecting expectations, her words cutting through confusion like a clean line. And then the car slowed, not abruptly, but enough to break the rhythm again. Her eyes lifted from the screen, just for a second, a construction zone ahead, cones narrowing the lanes, workers guiding traffic with deliberate motions, drivers around them pushed forward, inching into gaps, forcing movement where there was none. Daniel did not. He eased back slightly, allowing a larger space to open, waiting for a clear path instead of claiming one. We do not have time for this, Victoria said into the call, but her gaze stayed forward now, watching the way he chose not to move. The line of cars shifted, one driver cut sharply across, another honked in frustration. The noise rose, pressure building in the confined space, and still, he waited, hands steady, posture unchanged. Give me 1 second, she said into the phone, lowering it slowly, her attention no longer fully on the call. Why are you not moving? She asked, the question direct, not raised, just firm. Daniel glanced once at the narrowing lane, then back to the road ahead. Because they need to clear first, he said, his voice even, not defensive, not explaining beyond what was necessary. She looked at the workers, one of them guiding a truck backward into position, another signaling for cars to hold, a small, controlled chaos unfolding in front of them, something she would normally push through, override, compress. You can take that gap, she said, pointing slightly, the opening barely there. Other drivers already testing it. Daniel shook his head once, a small motion, almost unnoticeable. That gap will close, he replied, and then, after a brief pause, and someone will have to stop harder than they should. The words settled into the space between them, not challenging, not submissive, just true in the way he saw it. The lane ahead shifted again, the truck cleared, the workers stepped back, and the path opened cleanly. No resistance, no sudden braking. Daniel guided the car forward smoothly, merging without interruption. The noise behind them faded, the pressure dissolved as quickly as it had built. Victoria lifted the phone back to her ear, the call still active, voices waiting. She resumed speaking, but something in her tone had changed, just slightly less sharp, just slightly more measured, as if the moment had stretched time in a way she had not planned, and for the first time that day, she did not immediately try to make up the seconds they had lost. The car reached the next building at 3:18, 2 minutes ahead of the adjusted schedule, but Victoria did not step out immediately. Her hand remained on the door handle for a brief second longer than necessary, as if something in her timing no longer followed the exact command she had given it. Outside, the sidewalk moved in its usual rhythm, people passing without noticing the black car idling at the curb. Daniel had already stepped out, opening the door with the same quiet consistency. No glance at the clock, no sign that the 2 minutes mattered to him at all. She stepped out and walked toward the entrance, her assistant catching up quickly, tablet already raised. "You gained back the delay," the assistant said, almost with relief. Victoria nodded once, but her expression did not sharpen the way it usually did when time was recovered. The meeting upstairs unfolded as expected, negotiations, numbers, a controlled exchange of influence. She spoke clearly, decisively, every word placed with intent, but there were moments, small and nearly invisible, where she paused just a fraction longer before answering, not because she lacked the answer, but because something in her pace had shifted, as if she was allowing space where she once filled it instantly. By 4:30 the meeting ended. Outcomes secured, schedules updated, and the next destination already waiting. When she returned to the car, Daniel was there, exactly where he had been left, not checking his phone, not leaning in impatience, just present. He opened the door and she entered. The city outside had softened into late afternoon light, shadows stretching across the streets, traffic slower now, less aggressive, more tired. She sat back, phone in her hand, but did not unlock it immediately. The silence inside the car settled again, familiar now in a way it had not been that morning. "How long have you been driving?" she asked suddenly, the question breaking the pattern. Daniel adjusted the mirror slightly before answering. "Long enough," he said, his tone calm, not dismissive, just contained. She watched his reflection for a moment. "That is not an answer," she said, not sharply, just direct. He nodded once, as if acknowledging the expectation behind the question. 10 years, he replied. Before that. Something else. She waited. But he did not continue. The space after his words remained unfilled. She could have pressed, could have redirected, could have turned it into something useful, but she did not. Instead, she looked out the window, watching the city move at its uneven pace. A man carrying grocery bags too heavy for one trip, a woman laughing into her phone, a child pulling away from a parent's hand just long enough to step ahead. Small moments, unstructured, unmeasured. "You do not rush," she said after a while. More observation than judgment. Daniel's hands remained steady on the wheel. "No," he answered. Simple. She shifted slightly in her seat, the words forming before she fully decided to say them. "Why?" she asked, and this time, the question stayed in the air a little longer, not because he hesitated, but because he chose his answer carefully. "Because rushing does not make people safer," he said, his voice even, but carrying something deeper beneath it. Not emotion, not explanation, just a quiet certainty, the kind that does not need to prove itself. The car moved through a green light without acceleration, without urgency, just forward, steady. Victoria looked ahead, then down at her phone, then back at the road. The notifications were still there, the schedule still intact, but something in her grip loosened slightly, just enough to notice, just enough to feel. And for the first time that day, she let a full minute pass without trying to take it back. The sun had begun to dip lower by the time they reached the final stretch of the day, the light turning softer, less aggressive, casting long reflections across the glass buildings that once felt sharp and exact. Victoria sat back slightly in her seat, her posture still composed but no longer rigid. Her phone rested in her hand, but the screen remained dark. For once the silence was not something to fill, it was something she noticed, something she allowed. The car moved steadily through a quieter part of the city now, tree-lined streets, fewer horns, more space between vehicles. Daniel adjusted the speed gently as a school zone sign came into view, easing off the accelerator without needing to check the time. Without calculating the delay it might cause, the car slowed to 20 miles per hour, precise, intentional. Victoria glanced up, her eyes catching the sign. Then the children gathered near the sidewalk, backpacks loose on their shoulders, laughter unmeasured. A crossing. Guard raised a hand and Daniel stopped fully, not inching forward, not signaling impatience, just waiting. The pause stretched, longer than what most drivers would allow, longer than what her schedule would ever permit. And yet he did not move. One child hesitated at the curb, looking back at a friend, then stepped forward again. Daniel did not rush the moment. He simply held the space until it was complete. Until every child had crossed safely, until the guard lowered their hand. Only then did he move again, smooth, controlled, as if the delay had never existed. Victoria exhaled softly, almost without noticing. Her fingers loosened slightly around her phone. "You could have gone sooner," she said. But there was no edge to it now, just curiosity. Daniel kept his eyes forward. "They were still deciding," he replied. The answer simple, but it carried a weight she did not immediately respond to. Deciding. She repeated it silently. Not about traffic, not about time, but about people, about hesitation, about space, the kind she rarely allowed. Her gaze drifted back to the sidewalk behind them, now empty. The moment already passed. "You wait a lot," she said after a while. Daniel nodded once. "Only when it matters," he said, the words settling into the quiet space between them. Not heavy, not dramatic, just true. The car continued forward, the road opening again, but something in her pace did not return to its previous speed. She looked down at her phone, the notifications still waiting, the schedule still intact, every minute still accounted for. But her thumb did not move right away. Instead, she looked ahead, watching the way the light filtered through the trees, the way the road curved without urgency, the way the world continued without needing her to control every second of it. And for a brief moment, one she did not measure, she let herself sit in it, not correcting, not adjusting, just allowing it to exist. The car moved forward, steady as ever, but inside, something had shifted again, quieter this time, deeper, like a rhythm she was only beginning to hear. The car rolled to a quiet stop in front of a modest brick building just before 5:15. Not glass, not polished, just real, the kind of place that did not measure time in minutes, but in moments. Daniel turned off the engine and reached toward the back seat, pulling the small backpack forward again, checking it briefly, the same careful motion as before. Victoria noticed this time, not just the movement, but the intention behind it. "This is not on the schedule," she said, her voice calm. Not sharp, more observation than correction. Daniel glanced at the clock once, then back at the building. "I have 10 minutes, he replied. Simple, as if 10 minutes could exist without needing permission. She did not respond immediately. Her eyes followed his gaze to the front doors where children began to spill out in loose waves. Laughter uneven, energy uncontained, nothing like the controlled environments she moved through all day. He stepped out of the car, leaving the door closed behind him, not rushing, not asking, just moving with quiet certainty. Victoria remained inside, watching through the tinted glass as he walked toward the entrance. A few children ran past him without noticing. One nearly tripped, and he reached out instinctively, steadying the moment without drawing attention to it. Then he waited, just inside the boundary of the sidewalk, not pacing, not checking his phone, just present. A small boy appeared in the doorway, scanning the crowd, backpack slightly too large for his frame. His eyes landed on Daniel, and everything in his posture changed. Shoulders lifted, steps quickened. The boy ran toward him, and Daniel crouched slightly, not fully down, just enough to meet him halfway. The exchange was brief, quiet, the kind of moment that did not need words to carry meaning. Daniel adjusted the strap on the boy's backpack, brushing off a bit of dust near the edge, his movements precise but gentle. Then the boy began speaking, animated, hands moving as if trying to catch up with his own thoughts. Daniel listened, fully, not interrupting, not redirecting, just there. And when the boy paused, Daniel responded with something short, something that made the boy smile wider. Victoria could not hear the words, but she could see the rhythm, the same one she had felt all day, steady, unhurried, grounded in something that did not need to prove itself. After a few minutes, Daniel stood, placing a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder, guiding him toward the car, not pulling, not rushing, just leading. They approached together, and Daniel opened the back door. The boy climbed in, settling into the seat with a quiet familiarity. Victoria shifted slightly, making space without being asked. Daniel closed the door and returned to the driver's seat. The engine started again, the car moving forward, the city outside continuing its usual pace. But inside, something had changed. The presence in the back seat, the soft sound of a zipper opening, the rustle of paper. Victoria glanced into the rearview mirror. Just once, the boy was focused on something in his lap, a worksheet perhaps, pencil already in hand. Daniel adjusted the mirror slightly, not to hide the view, but to see it more clearly. Homework, he said quietly, not as explanation, just acknowledgement. The boy nodded without looking up. Math, he added, as if that explained everything. Victoria looked back toward the road, her phone still in her hand, the schedule still waiting, but for the first time, she did not reach for it. The car moved forward, not fast, not slow, just enough. And the 10 minutes he had taken did not feel lost. They felt placed exactly where they needed to be. The car moved through the late afternoon light, softer now, stretched across the dashboard in quiet gold. The boy in the back seat leaned forward slightly, pencil tapping once against the paper before settling again. I do not get this one, he said, holding the worksheet up just enough for Daniel to see in the mirror. Daniel glanced briefly, not long, just enough to understand. Show me what you tried, he replied, his voice low, steady, the kind that did not rush an answer. The boy explained. Numbers half-formed, logic unfinished. Daniel listened without interrupting, letting the explanation land fully before speaking. You are close, he said, but you skipped a step. His tone did not correct. It guided. The boy frowned slightly, thinking, then nodded, adjusting the numbers on the page. The pencil moved again, slower this time, more certain. Victoria watched through the reflection, not turning fully, just enough to see the exchange unfold. The rhythm of it felt familiar now, the same measured pace, the same refusal to rush something that mattered. The car slowed at a light, red holding them in place, but no one inside seemed pressed by it. Is it right now? The boy asked after a moment. Daniel checked again, just a glance. It is better, he said. Finish it, and we will see. The boy leaned back, continuing, his focus deep, undistracted by the city outside. Victoria looked down at her phone, the screen still dark, notifications waiting without urgency. She turned it over in her hand once, then set it beside her instead of opening it. The light changed, and the car moved forward again, smooth, uninterrupted. You always say that, the boy said from the back, a hint of a smile in his voice. Finish it, and we will see. Daniel's lips shifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Because you always try to skip the part where you learn, he replied. The words simple, but they carried something that lingered. The boy huffed lightly, not offended, just caught, and went back to the page. Victoria's gaze shifted forward, but her mind stayed with the words, the part where you learn. She repeated it silently, not about math, not about a worksheet, but about time, about the space between moments she usually compressed. She thought about the 4 minutes that morning, the pause at the construction lane, the stop at the school crossing, the 10 minutes outside this building. None of it had been efficient by her standards. None of it had fit the system she had built, and yet none of it had felt wasted. The car turned onto a quieter street, residential now, trees lining both sides, houses set back just enough to feel separate from the city's urgency. Daniel slowed again. Not because he had to, but because the space allowed it. The boy finished writing and held the paper up again. Now, he said, more confident this time. Daniel looked, a second longer than before, then nodded once. Now it is right, he said, the approval quiet. But it landed. The boy leaned back, satisfied, folding the paper carefully instead of shoving it aside. Victoria glanced back once more, meeting his reflection briefly. The boy smiled without hesitation. A simple, open expression, not measuring, not guarded. She returned her gaze forward, but something in her expression had softened, just slightly. The car continued down the street. No rush, no pressure, just movement. And for the first time that day, Victoria did not think about what came next. She stayed with what was already happening, the quiet, the rhythm, the space, and she did not try to change it. The car came to a gentle stop in front of a small, two-story house with a narrow porch and a single light already glowing near the door, the kind of place that did not announce itself but held warmth in quiet ways. Daniel turned off the engine and glanced back. The boy had already packed his worksheet, sliding it carefully into the backpack as if it mattered. "We are home," Daniel said, his voice soft but certain. The boy nodded and reached for the door, then paused, looking toward Victoria for a brief second, not unsure, just aware. She met his eyes in the mirror, a small moment, unspoken, then gave a slight nod. Enough. He stepped out and Daniel followed, walking him to the door, not rushing, not dragging the moment longer than needed, just present. The boy turned once before going inside. A quick wave. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a quiet finality. Daniel stood there for a second longer, just enough to make sure everything was settled, then turned and walked back to the car. The street was still, evening settling in, no urgency left in the air. He opened the driver's door and sat down, hands resting lightly on the wheel again, not starting the engine yet. Victoria remained in the back seat, her phone beside her, untouched, the schedule still there, still full, but no longer pulling at her in the same way. The silence returned, deeper now, not unfamiliar anymore, just full. "You always take that time," she said, her voice quieter than it had been. "All day." Not a challenge, not even a question. Daniel looked ahead, the porch light casting a soft glow in the rearview mirror. "Yes," he answered. Simple. She leaned back slightly, her eyes following the light, then the empty sidewalk, then nothing in particular. "Even if it costs you something," she added, the words slower now, as if she was measuring them differently. Daniel nodded once. "It does not cost the right things," he replied, and the sentence stayed in the air longer than expected. Not because it was complicated, but because it was clear. She did not respond right away. Her gaze dropped briefly to her phone, then lifted again, not to the screen, but to the space in front of her, the road that was no longer calling her forward. Not in that moment, not in the way it had before. She reached for the phone, not to check the time, not to adjust the schedule, but to turn it off completely. The screen went dark, and she set it down again. The motion small, but deliberate. "Tomorrow," she said after a while, her voice steady, but different now. "Keep the schedule." She paused, just a fraction, but leave space. Daniel did not turn, did not react outwardly, but something in his posture acknowledged it. A quiet understanding, the kind that did not need to be spoken twice. The engine started again, low and steady. The car pulled away from the curb, moving into the evening without urgency. The city still there, still moving, but no longer something she needed to control completely. And as the streetlights came on one by one, Victoria Hale sat in the back seat and did not reach for the time. She let it move on its own,